formal, informal, and self-assessment objectives and techniques. Informal assessment. Informal assessment is a way of collecting information about our students' performance in normal classroom conditions. When we are in the classroom with our students, we intuitively assess their performance when speaking, writing, reading, or listening. Project-based assignments and presentations are examples of informal assessment. It helps to boost up the confidence of all the students. Tests, quizzes, and grading samples are all types of informal assessment. However, to carry out effective informal assessment, we need to carry out systematic observation. Firstly, we need to work out what we are going to assess, as it is obviously impossible to assess all students' performance all the time. Then, we must establish clear criteria for assessing the students and not only rely on rough impressions. Finally, it is important to link the informal assessment we do with our formal assessment and with self-assessment done by the students themselves. Informal assessment develops sets of criteria to help describe observations of each language skill, and to thereby make informal assessment more systematic and therefore more reliable than an off-the-cuff observation, and this is achieved through the use of band descriptors and band scales. Band scales. We need to have a system which assures some degree of reliability in our informal assessment of students' performance. This can be done through designing a band scale which includes a number of divisions or bands of possible students' performance and descriptors for each band. There's two types of scales, holistic or analytic scales. Holistic gives an overall description of the ability. A student's performance is matched to one of the bands. For example, analytic scales. These separate out aspects of language performance into individual scales, giving a profile of performance. At issue here is the number of bands that a scale attempts to discriminate. The more bands that are used, the more difficult it is to make reliable descriptors of each band. For example, self-assessment. Many learners develop informal self-assessment devices which they use to monitor their progress, such as attempting to read a newspaper or of listening comprehension by listening to the radio. Techniques for different contexts for self-assessment. Learners can design their own tests or administer those written by others. Learners can be responsible for making their own tests. This is very common when learners are preparing for some external examination. In self-help groups, students get together to mark and comment on the subjectively marked parts of a test without teacher's intervention. The use of self-assessment in placement testing, in which self-rating questionnaires for the learners helps to decide where on a scale he/she will place his level of competence. An important aspect of successful self-assessment is the need to upkeep good records of the records of assessment. This enables learners to make judgment of their progress over time. A folder of records might contain a needs analysis form, records of work complete. Formal assessment. A formal assessment is a method that is used to check the knowledge level of a student by giving them a score in an objective type test. It is a way to find out what the student has learned during his lecture or instruction period. Tests and quizzes are the most common examples of formal assessment. Formal assessments are used by teachers when they want to know the knowledge criteria of their students. Formal methods of grading in tests help the teachers to know about the performance of their students. Due to formal assessment, students pay more attention during their lecture and attend it carefully. Formal assessments help the students to get higher marks by performing well in the class. Through formal assessment, students move to the next step of the learning phase. A formal assessment provides an overview of any student's knowledge. Formal assessment, objective testing techniques. Discrete point techniques are those which lead to objective scoring with the testing of aspects of grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation, as well as receptive skills. Hidden reviews discrete point techniques including transformation, completion, combination, addition, grammar, rearrangement, correct, incorrect, or true-false, matching elements, dual choice, and multiple choice. Integrative objective testing techniques. The term integrative is associated with first-generation testing, which use objective techniques to test a wide range of language skills at one time. The techniques associated with this development are improve multiple choice. The question might ask the students to answer about a wider range of sources, several texts rather than only one. Learners may make their choice by reacting to the whole of a text, rather than small parts of it. There may be several right answers, for example, a summary of part of the context of a text which applies equally to two of the texts. Multiple matching. Learners are given two lists of things to match with something in the second column. Dictation. Dictation is a successful teaching technique. Learner has to use a range of decoding skills, isolating words from the sound chain, predicting and processing lexical and grammatical possibilities, using contextual cues to resolve homophones and ambiguities. Information transfer. This refers to techniques which use pictures, diagrams, maps, or other visual to provide information which learners must convert to another form. This can be used to test either active writing and speaking or passive reading and listening skills. Close procedure. Close procedure in testing involves deleting words from a text at intervals. The task set is to restore the missing words, or particular classes of words might be deleted. Even the learner might be offered multiple choice answers to the gaps. Since each blank tests only one part of language and there should be only one correct answer, the close test is regarded as an objective testing technique. Objective testing evaluated. Objective testing techniques are indicated whenever it is desirable to test isolated items of language, whether they be a grammar point, a point of pronunciation, or a lexical item. Objective testing techniques are often preferred in situations where a lot stands to be gained or lost from the results of a test, commonly where people are competing for jobs or places on a course on the basis of a test results. Objective testing can be seen to have good reliability and high practicality. They offer a quick and easy way to discriminate between learners for placement tests. They do not, however, test a full range of language skills adequately and have a potentially negative washback effect on teaching and learning, since people are tempted to teach through multiple choice questions. Subjective testing techniques. Marrow lists 7 features of ordinary communicative situations which should be represented in a communicative test. Interaction-based. Unpredictability. Context. Varies with role, status, and formality. Purpose. Performance, rather than Chomsky competence. Authenticity. Behavior-based. Performance should be judged in terms of outcomes. There's emphasis on the stimulation of real life that has become the hallmark of communicative tests. Subjective techniques evolve around the need to assess samples of this simulation of real-life language use. Subjective techniques evaluated. In practice, subjective testing techniques are normally used to test the productive skills, speaking and writing. Reading, listening, grammar, and vocabulary can be tested objectively. Practicality. The subjective techniques associated with communicative tests involve large numbers of markers and more time. It's much slower process than objective scoring and may require 2 assessors for double marking. Reliability. Rating scales have reduced the subjectivity of scoring, and while the use of rating scales reduces unreliability, it cannot be removed completely. The gain in validity of testing communication has to be offset against this lack of reliability. Assessment of speaking production, the current picture. This can be seen as an inevitable and necessary part of the evolution of communicative testing. While we might, or in fact must, take a simplified view of the current situation in order to develop some guidelines to help us actually design a speaking test. Communicative testing might point to achieve for success based on the following points. A speaking test should be integrative in nature. They must be scored subjectively. The use of well-constructed scales and examiner training will compensate for the lack of reliability introduced by subjective scoring. The choice of realistic tasks will give a good measure of performance in real-life situations. Such as speaking test items will have high face and content validity and positive flashback and watch-forward effects since they are clearly related to the learner's need in real life. Assessment of writing. Current testing practice in writing suggests the need for real-world tasks. They reflect real language use and therefore can be used to predict language performance. They have better watchback effect and can be scored more reliably. The recent use of multi-trait analytical marking schemes has been favored over the sole use of global schemes. In this way, one aspect of the writer's performance will not necessarily affect the whole judgment of performance. Also, a global mark cannot represent the language performance of those learners who have an uneven profile, who are good in one aspect of writing but poor in another. Assessment of reading. With the move towards communicative testing has come a shift in emphasis in the testing of reading. Preference is given to integrative objective tests of reading. The use of more authentic text types and associated real purposes for reading has become prevalent. The choice of a task which will be useful to the learner in the later use of language is also important. Assessment of listening. Listening tests often require the learners to read in order to make a response, to remember, or to take notes. Many real-life listening tasks ask for similar use of other skills. Is a consideration in the design of tests, since an assessment of performance can be muddied by the requirements of answering the questions. The use of discrete points or global testing items, as the language tester has to decide whether the learner's purpose in listening is best served by a specific understanding tasks or by global understanding of the text. Conclusions. Assessments are an important part of any educational job. It helps all the teachers to assess their students so that they can make correct decisions about grasping the students. As we analyzed previously, assessment has been classified into two categories, formal and informal. Formal and informal assessments are both essential parts of the learning phase. They can be used to improve learning and teaching. The reasons for testing is to measure the academic progress of students, and that's when we draw upon use of formal assessment. And if we want to know about the student's progress and skill level, then throw a hand of informal assessment. Both assessments are used for the academic and functional performance of the students. They both have their benefits, but when they combine, they provide a lot of students information that helps our teachers to know more about them. The formal and informal assessment also increases the motivation level of students to do better. To make testing more productive, it's necessary to take the fair approach and prepare students anytime we are doing any kind of formalized testing. Doing review sessions, giving them worksheets, and even providing very similar exercises as to what will be presented on the test are all useful ways to make sure students are ready for the test. Alternative to testing might be checklists, in which every day and with each activity applied in class and rubric that indicates students' achievement of the class.